Let me tell you a story, not because it is extraordinary, but because it carries lessons that can guide anyone from wherever they are to wherever they wish to be. I grew up in an ordinary home, raised by parents who held no titles, owned no big companies, and never appeared on magazine covers. They were simple people who worked hard, paid their bills, and kept their promises. From them I learned that life is not measured by what you have, but by the values you carry. But even with those values, I found myself as a young man drifting through life, living on hopes and wishes, waiting for something magical to happen on its own. I thought good intentions were enough, and I believed that somehow success would find me just because I wanted it. But life has its own way of waking you up, and my wake-up call was harsh. At 25 years old, I had pennies in my pocket, month after month of overdue promises, and a future that looked like nothing more than a repetition of past mistakes. I remember standing in a small, quiet room one night, wondering how a person with such big dreams could end up with such small results. That night, I realized something powerful. Life doesn't respond to wishes, it responds to discipline, to decisions, and to the courage to change. And that realization became the turning point. Then came the moment that reshaped everything. I met a mentor, a wise man whose words carried the weight of experience. He asked me questions that shook me to the core. He said, "If you don't change, what will the next 5 years look like?" It wasn't an accusation, it was a mirror held up to my life. And I saw clearly that if I kept doing what I was doing, nothing would change. He taught me that success is not something you pursue blindly, it is something you attract by becoming a stronger, wiser, more disciplined version of yourself. Life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And that became the philosophy that rebuilt my life. I began reading books, not casually, but with hunger. I listened to tapes and studied ideas that had shaped great minds. I learned the power of setting goals, not vague dreams, but written, clear, detailed goals that pull you toward a better future. I began saving money even when I had very little. I worked harder on myself than I worked on my job. I stopped blaming circumstances and started building character. Slowly but surely, doors began to open. Opportunities showed up because I was finally prepared to receive them. The world wasn't changing, I was changing. Within a few years, I went from struggling to stand on my feet to building a life filled with purpose, opportunity, and abundance. But the true success wasn't the money, the travel, or the recognition. The real success was discovering that anyone, absolutely anyone, can rewrite their story if they are willing to grow, willing to learn, and willing to discipline their emotions, their time, their habits, and their expectations. The real victory was understanding that a bigger life starts with a bigger mindset. And now I share this story not to impress you, but to impress upon you that your past does not control your future. I was an ordinary person who simply decided that ordinary was no longer enough. My transformation didn't begin with wealth, opportunity, or talent. It began the moment I took responsibility for every part of my life and understood that change begins with it. You don't need a perfect background or perfect timing. You only need the decision to no longer settle for less than you are capable of becoming. Your life can be transformed the moment you start transforming yourself. So wherever you are today, whether you're struggling, searching, or simply hoping, remember this: you are one decision away from a completely different life. Work on your mind, work on your habits, work on your discipline, work on the person you are becoming. Because when you grow, everything around you begins to expand, doors open, opportunities appear, people begin to notice, and life begins to respond. The story I lived is proof that success is not reserved for the lucky, it is reserved for the intentional. Your future is not waiting for you somewhere out there. Your future is waiting for you inside the person you decide to become. And once you shape that person, success has no choice but to follow.